Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very sorry for this delay. It was caused by technical problems of some of panelists. Hopefully, we eradicated it already. I'm Anna Fotyga, member of the European Parliament, Polish member of the European Parliament ECR group. On behalf of my group, I have the pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to our event under a title With Open Hearts. We want to describe relief efforts of Central and Eastern Europe in assisting our neighbor, Ukraine, attacked brutally in unprovoked way by the Russian Federation on 24th of February. Today there is 84th day of this appalling, brutal, criminal invasion, already causing enormous suffering of ordinary people, civilian objects, infrastructure, housing facilities, but also places like hospitals, schools, kindergartens, theaters, were attacked with numerous victims, people perishing, children, women, men, those who wanted to resist invasion with arms in their hands, but also ordinary citizens living peacefully in Ukraine. There are millions of refugees, both outside of Ukraine in neighboring countries, in particular in my home country, Poland, but also in many other countries of Central and Eastern Europe. We would like to present three cases, Polish situation, Slovak and Moldovan case. I warmly welcome our panelists, members of the European Parliament, representatives of diplomatic corps here accredited here in Brussels. This event we conduct both in physical way and remotely. Allow me to present our distinguished speakers one by one before their contribution. So without much ado, I would like to present first panelist. Okay, now there are surprises. So even now I have to change. We have still problems, technical problems with connection. I would like now to give the floor to Chairman of Foreign Affairs Committee in lower chamber of Polish Parliament, the same MP Marek Kuchciński, formerly Speaker of Polish Parliament, to present situation of Ukrainian refugees in Poland, Polish efforts to assist them as much as possible, and also Polish relief efforts addressed to those Ukrainians remaining in their country. There are many IDPs, actually majority of refugees fleeing from war areas directly attacked by Russian Federation, are still in their country in different in different places. So without much ado, I would like to give the floor to Chairman Kuchciński. Panie Marszałku, bardzo proszę.
I give you the floor. Thank you. And welcome, Madam Chair. I would like to say hello to everyone else. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me at this conference. I will present to you information in the form of pictures that I would like to paint. I would like to share some remarks as well to describe the situation and to perhaps outline some of the approaches that we have adopted in Poland to aid Ukraine. As is well known, in Central and Eastern Europe, which is divided up by borders, and it's not only the external border of the European Union, which is extremely important, and everybody can see how important it is based on the current Ukrainian war. After barbaric aggression by the Russian Federation, war broke out, and in this war we definitely support Ukraine in many ways. We support Ukraine politically, militarily, as well as in a humanitarian manner. We take care of war refugees who had to leave Ukraine and who arrived in Poland. The situation is actually deteriorating, even though the number of people arriving in Poland has dwindled. At the very peak, in the early weeks, that number exceeded 150,000 refugees per day. Our 12 crossings were crossed over from Ukraine. Currently, that number is down to 20,000. Nevertheless, these individuals are arriving in Poland from the war zones. These are persons who are in a very difficult situation personally. They are psychologically traumatized. I would like to start with some facts. Out of the 6 million Ukrainians who have fled their country, nearly 3.5 million arrived in Poland between the 24th of, or since the 24th of February. These are mainly war refugees, and we're referring to them as refugees, although formally they are people simply fleeing from war. Up until now, the Polish government has spent 8 billion zlotys in support, assisting the refugees who arrived in our country. And that money is paid out mainly by local governments, as well as NGOs, and various foundations, as well as individuals. To that end, a few weeks ago, a special law was enacted that allows that support for refugees arriving in Poland, and that enables them to take residence in our country and find jobs. More than 100,000 Ukrainians are in employment and to receive a personal identification number. We are preparing a new law that will establish wide-based systemic solutions. Up until now, the personal identification number database, which includes all Polish citizens, was increased by 1,100,000 Ukrainian citizens. According to estimates, more than 1.5 million are willing to remain in Poland in the long term. 1,100,000 of them, and that's more than 200,000 children, they're learning in Polish schools. More than 150,000 of them attend grade schools. We're going to continue this support, and according to estimates, in 2022, the Polish government is going to spend 3.5 billion euros to support Ukrainians, and that money will go for housing, to make housing available, as well as to transportation. We're going to supply 100 million euros in assistance in hygienic supplies, medicines, and temporary buildings that are going to be constructed in Ukraine. That process began a few weeks ago. It was started by our Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki at a time when a few hundred such apartment units were completed in Lviv. Speaking of the refugees, please note that the refugee crisis and Poland's approach to Ukrainians goes back in time. It has its roots historically. That crisis is perceived by millions of Poles as a reminder of what our grandparents went through in 1939 up until 1940. Their situation was quite similar when Soviets and Germans occupied Poland. However, there is a distinct difference today between economic refugees and war refugees coming out of Ukraine. The economic refugees that have been coming to various countries of Europe between 2015 and 2016 and in the following years, they were the targets of hybrid attacks. And last year, for instance, on the Polish-Belarusian border, those attacks began. They began also on the Polish, Lithuanian, and Latvian borders as an attempt to destabilize Europe. We make a clear distinction between these economic immigrants being used by the Belarusian state and Russia, and a few years ago on the Hungarian border. We make a clear line of distinction between those immigrants and the refugees fleeing war and coming into Poland as well as other countries, because a number of other countries also border Ukraine. Hence the response of the Polish government and the Polish public, which is very supportive for these Ukrainians. Previously, Poland was the target of propaganda attacks by various political forces motivated by hostility towards Poland, accusing us of xenophobia. These resulted from the refusal of Poland years ago to accept immigrant quotas, which the European Union were to allocate also to Poland. And one more remark. the majority of the refugees coming to Poland, the war refugees coming from Ukraine, were accepted in Poland in private homes offered by Polish citizens as a way to help people in need. Poland is not creating refugee camps. Poland is not forcing anyone to remain or to come. We don't believe in forced relocations. For us, refugees are free people, and they can make their own decisions as to which country they want to seek shelter in. According to our estimates, more than 300,000 of the Ukrainian refugees who used to work in Poland have returned to Ukraine, men mostly, to pick up arms and to take part in the war against the Russian aggressor, against Putin's Russia. The Polish government is providing administrative, legal environment and funding, provides funding to help refugees. Our help is viewed as assistance to people fighting the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Because if you look back a few hundred years, it turns out that Poland fought as many as 18 wars with Ukraine, starting in the late 15th century up until 1939, in defense against further invasion by Russia. And the current Ukrainian war is depicted as a proxy war which is fought by Ukraine for us. If Ukraine is defeated, then Russia will continue its invasions into other European countries, which increases the sentiment of solidarity with Ukraine very much in Poland. Poland to Ukraine is important, and we are well aware of the fact that it is essential. However, only a victory can save the people of Ukraine, a victory over the invader, and therefore, in our view, what's key to Ukraine is military assistance, weapons supplies, to enable it to defend itself and to defend the rest of Europe from the Russian imperialism. Thank you very much. Greetings.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie marszałku. My też pozdrawiamy.
Thank you very much.
Now, luckily, we have improved connection with our next speaker, His Excellency Ambassador of Ukraine to Poland, Mr. Andriy Deszczyca. Allow me just few personal remarks, Ambassador, Excellency. I remember during Maidan in February of 2014, I learned about your appointment to the office of acting foreign minister of Ukraine, and I remember thinking how brave you were and how important to have experienced diplomats fighting for sovereignty of your country. We were lucky all those years having you in Poland as the highest ranking representative of Ukraine to Warsaw, and I'm able to monitor on daily basis your efforts, your endeavors, and your patriotism. Excellency, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Minister. I'm glad that I'm now connected with you, with the conference. And Thank you very much for inviting me and organizing this event. It is very important to show now to the rest of the world how Poland managed to deal with such big number of immigrants who were forced to leave Ukraine because of Russian aggression. And thank you for words of you telling about my activities here in Poland. But I should be frank in saying that without such a big support of Polish government, of President Duda, and local governments and people of Poland, it would be very difficult to take care of all Ukrainians who came to Poland recently. And as you know, and probably these figures were already mentioned, it's about more than 3 million people who crossed Ukrainian-Polish border since the beginning of war. And most of them, I believe that 80% of them decided to stay in Poland. And I have to congratulate Polish government and local governments for excellent work which was done to make sure that these people feel secure and feel like at home. Of course, very difficult to say it that they are at home. They always are thinking about going back to Ukraine. But in the meantime, until situation is in Ukraine is not secure enough, and it's still there is a danger to go back, they have a chance to get what the migrants can get in such difficult times. And I think that the activities of decision of that was made by the Polish government, the Polish parliament, has to be an example for the other countries and the rest of the world, because that I've been talking very often with Ukrainians. I've been traveling a lot to the border with Ukraine and to the checkpoints on Ukrainian-Polish border, to all these information centers that were created on near the border, particularly, but also here in main cities, and all the Ukrainians who were visiting them, with whom I've been talked, they were telling me that they are impressed, and personally I'm also impressed how everything was organized in a very good manner. And there is a information where you can go, where you can find housing, where you can find information about the social medical care. But what is important, that all the legislation that was adopted from the beginning of war was oriented on giving the Ukrainians the same rights in Poland as Polish citizens. So all Ukrainians in Poland can have the medical care, social care, access to education, and as it was said by Mr. Kuchtinski recently in previous speech, that mainly they live in private houses, but also the housing was provided to Ukrainians. So it's a great change in relations between Ukrainian and Polish people, and I think it's a very good ground to develop good relations for the future. As I know, there are a big number of Ukrainians who are already returning back to Ukraine, but of course many of them are staying in Poland, and they are actually were satisfied with what they have already received, but they wanted to be more independent. And of course, there are some limits with the numbers of days and months when they can stay as a guest in private houses. So the main for them, the main task now for them is important to have their own housing and jobs. The jobs they can find somehow, but again, the many of them would like to start their own businesses. And I think it's a good idea because they will learn the practices and learn the legislation in which the businesses can be opened in Poland as an EU country. So it would be easy for them to adjust all these practices in Ukraine when they move back, applying the same standards, EU standards in Ukraine. With doing business or living or providing different type of assistance, social or medical or education. And being here in Poland, I think that all those Ukrainians who spent time even before the war, and we should keep in mind that there were about between 1 and 2 million Ukrainians working, living, studying in Poland before the war. They all are already uh, adjusted to the new EU standards of living and working. And I think this is not only I wanted to see this unfortunately tragic move of Ukrainians from Ukraine to Poland in a positive and or more optimistic way. So even if they moved here to Poland, if they were forced to leave Ukraine, they have a chance to live in new realities and in a country which is developing, which is a member of the European Union, which where the EU standards in new legislations is working, and they will simply be learning these practices and passing this to Ukraine in a time when Ukraine will be joining the European Union. Many of them will be promoters of these standards. However, what we really need now is to make sure that all these good practices and all this enthusiasm which was seen in the first months of war here in Poland, enthusiasm of receiving Ukrainians. And Ukrainians, actually, also is proud that I am ambassador of a country which is fighting with Russia, but also ambassador of the Ukrainian citizens that are showing a good example here in Poland. They are good citizens here, and there are no big tensions in so far in Poland. However, we need to keep these tendencies, we need to keep this enthusiasm for a future, and we need to think how to make sure that the Ukrainians will receive all those benefits that were promised by the Polish government, but not in the cost of Poles, because then we will create a tension. So what we really need to all to work for is to get an extra financing of Polish budget and extra money for the Polish government and local government, so they can be able to provide all necessary assistance for Ukrainians that are now staying in Poland. Because these Ukrainians are not going further to Europe. They are mainly all of those 3 million Ukrainians who move to Poland, 80% are staying in Poland, which means that Poland needs financial assistance from the European Union, and there is such assistance. And I think it's a time to unblock this assistance, which will help not only Poland but also help Ukrainians, and also will help the Europeans. That Ukrainians will feel that the European Union is taking care of them also in Poland. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for this presentation, and in particular for your positive and optimistic view that gives us really hope. Here in the European Parliament, we very much believe in Ukraine winning this war. I'm personally sure that Russian Federation should be defeated in this campaign, and therefore all of us, we want to make every effort needed to assist you in this endeavor. I'm sure that your remarks concerning the necessity to provide solidarity within the EU applies also to next case we want to present, and it will be done by my dear colleague, MEP Miriam Lexman, Slovakian member of the European Parliament. Slovakia is a host to refugees as well, with whole society contributing to this cause. I welcome Miriam, and please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you. It's always a great pleasure to work with you and nourish the relationship between Slovakia and Poland within the European Union. I will not repeat many of the arguments and many of the strong statements done by Marshal Kuchinski and the ambassador, but I will echo that our Ukrainian brothers are fighting for the very values on which the European Union was founded. And this is the basic we should start with when we discuss the situation in Ukraine and when we discuss the situation of refugees in our countries. There is no time for ideological disputes and ideological fights inside of the European Union. We have to do our utmost that the European Union is united, that the citizens of the European Union understand the urgency of the situation and the need for help to Ukraine, not only because these are people as us and these are people who need help, but also because of the moral failures we have done for many years in order maybe not to prevent this war, but maybe not to support this war directly, but maybe we could have done much more in order to prevent this war. Also, we have to understand within the geopolitical context and explain to our citizens that practically our support to Ukraine is also support for our own peace and our own stability. And this is the message we need to share. I'm speaking about the messages mainly because Slovakia, unfortunately, is at the very tail of when we look in the polls. Yesterday, the US Congress has asked the company Meta, which is practically the company of Facebook, to do something in order to fight the Kremlin disinformation in Slovakia, which is practically turning this country into an ally of the aggressor in many ways. I have to admit that here we have to also look into our own space, because the propaganda, the narratives, the messages which are supporting the aggressor are not coming only from Kremlin, but unfortunately are echoed and created by the former governmental party and the party of the Prime Minister, Smer, direction, which is translated direction, and its a party of which actually has broken up from Smer, which is Hlas, voice in English. These two parties, together with the far right in Slovakia, are generating lots of narratives, lots of disinformation, which is actually supporting the aggressor and is turning Slovakia, I would say, against Ukrainian people and against the aims and the goals of the European Union. And this is one of the points which we have to look into, because this party, Smer, is still part of the European Socialist Group. And I think this is unacceptable, knowing what deal they play in the fact that Slovakia is in a very fragile state, I would say, in terms of geopolitics. I will bring up a couple of data. The majority of Slovaks are against the opinion that Russia is responsible for the Ukrainian war. The majority of people in Slovakia are against increase of NATO forces in Slovakia in order to secure our stability. The majority of people in Slovakia are against increase of investment into defense. 49% of the Slovaks are for and supporting economic cooperation and diplomacy with Russia. And in compared to the EU general average, only 34% of Slovaks, and the EU average is 55%, support sanctions against Russia. Only 17% of Slovaks, and the EU average is 33%, are supporting sending military equipment to Ukraine. 51% of Slovaks versus 64% EU average are supporting sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and only 20% of Slovaks, and the EU average is 31%, are agreeing with the statement that that Ukraine is part of the European family. These are absolutely worrying data, and I just decided to share with you this data because when within the context of this data, we look into the influx of Ukrainians into Slovakia, I think it's practically a miracle that Slovakia is managing, that the government is managing. In terms of the infrastructure, at the very beginning, it was very difficult, and I have to admit that I myself, knowing where Slovakia stands in the kind of geopolitical issues, because these data are not new. We knew these kind of tendencies in Slovakia for many years from many different polls. Also in my previous job, when I worked for the International Republican Institute, we were doing polling very often, and we were looking precisely into this, the success of Kremlin disinformation in different countries, and we knew that Slovakia is a very fertile field for them. So within this context, the fact that Slovakia is managing is a miracle. Slovakia is managing mainly because of the enormous efforts of the two regions, the Košice region and the Prešov regions, who practically from the first day managed to put in force most of the infrastructure, accommodation, transport, trying to find jobs, trying to kind of create support for these people. I'm not saying this that the regions have managed just because my husband is a governor of one of these regions, of the Prešov region, but this was the practically situation in Slovakia. It was practically these two regions, together with NGOs and civil society and volunteers and the Catholic Church, and I have to highlight this because this is often forgotten, that the church has managed to bring lots of volunteers, the priests and nuns and the people and the brothers and sisters were standing on the borders and welcoming the people. Of course, the regions were providing the infrastructure. Later on, also with the help of the EU funding, the state came in and started to kind of organize the infrastructure even, more efficiently, because this is the role of the state. What I would say are the biggest challenges. The situation is still very calm, and the situation and the people, I would say in the people-to-people contact, it's still very positive, despite of the data I have mentioned, which is a miracle, but we have to do much more, and the EU and together as a European society in order to prevent that there will be an escalation of the situation, because with the narratives, with the disinformation which is floating from all the channels into the people, and the more economic, the economic and social challenges the people are facing, of the increase of the prices of the food, increase of the prices of energy, I mean, there is a risk that the situation will change and the Ukrainians will be not welcomed as they are until now. Especially the kind of crisis moments might be schools, because we have lack of schools, and especially kindergartens, where now parents practically see that they have difficulties to get their children into schools, while Ukrainian children are sort of prioritized, because it's the kind of information the directors of the schools get, that the Ukrainian children need to be in the school. So practically the Slovaks sometimes feel like they are discriminated against. The same is in terms of jobs, where unfortunately it's true that the Ukrainians are able to take any kind of jobs, but seeing it from the majoritarian population, it's often the angle is different, and they believe that their jobs are taken, rather than these jobs are often jobs which the Slovaks are not willing to do. And the third, I would say, part which we need to focus on is medical aid, because this is again, many Slovaks and citizens of Slovakia have difficulties to get surgeries on time, medical aid on time, especially also with COVID, many things delayed. The health situation of the population is not very well, because many of the operations, many of the surgeries were delayed because of COVID. Now we have many Ukrainians who come, and because of their psychological state and because of the trauma they're going through, of course, this is also creating lots of health problems, and they need medical aid. So these are the parts where I believe that we need to focus, and also the EU aid needs to focus in order for our society to manage it. And I believe that maybe I will start conclude with what I started. It's that because of the open hearts of many people in Slovakia, the situation, we can manage the situation. What we need is to have help from the European Union. We have to feel the unity of the Union, and we have to also feel that we are supported in the areas where we feel risks, and the disinformation is one of them, where Slovakia cannot help itself, because this is precisely, we need to make pressure on the international platforms, the big platform companies providing information and social media, is that they will take responsibility, because this is a wartime, and their role in the wartime might be really strategic, and I believe that they need to understand that what role they can play, and if they can help free and democratic societies to take over and win this war, or they can also be part of the moral, share the moral responsibility on this. Thank you very much.
Miriam, thank you very much indeed for this very honest contribution to our seminar. We'll have time for conclusions later on. Now, allow me to welcome delegation of Ukrainian MPs present today in the European Parliament. Dear friends, welcome, warmly welcome, and we'll give you the floor later after presentation of those cases and other panelists. Be sure of our constant support. This event is also to raise very particular topic, humanitarian issues, but we are aware of other areas where European Union and individual member states should engage more much more than even now in order to help you winning this dreadful, appalling war. Now I would like to give the floor to Deputy Speaker of the Moldovan Parliament, Mr. Mikhail Popsoy. Just 1 month ago, the delegation of Foreign Affairs Committee and SEDE visited Chisinau and also Moldovan-Ukrainian border, assessing the situation in Moldova, both political and economic, social, including efforts to host refugees for a small country still outside of the EU. Moldova applied for the EU membership in between, and we strongly support this application. But situation is certainly very complicated. Mr. Popso is co-chair of EU Moldova Interparliamentary Assembly, and he is also member of numerous committees, extremely active member of the Moldovan Parliament. Sir, floor is yours.
Thank you, dear friends. Indeed, the Republic of Moldova has been trying its best, despite its own vulnerabilities, to provide support to the almost 500,000 Ukrainian refugees that have crossed the Moldovan border, which is per capita the largest number compared to any other of the neighbors of Ukraine. And we will continue to do our utmost to help our Ukrainian friends and neighbors. Currently, around 100,000 Ukrainian refugees remain in Moldova. About half of them are minors, and we are doing our best we can to provide the best comfort and assistance despite our own vulnerabilities. We have provided medical insurance. We have provided the possibility to work in Moldova, for the children to go to school, to benefit from all the public services that we can provide. And from this perspective, the Republic of Moldova will continue to do everything it can to support Ukraine in its fight against the Russian aggression, which Moldova has condemned clearly and repeatedly at the UN, at the Council of Europe, and at many other international fora, siding with the free world, with our Ukrainian friends and with the international community in condemning this barbaric aggression and violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And at the same time, Moldova has been applying the economic sanctions when it comes to SWIFT, so with the Moldovan banking system. Moldova has been supporting Ukraine with humanitarian assistance in the form of food items, medications, fuel, and Moldova has offered also to provide sappers in helping Ukraine to destroy and dispose of the landmines that have been laid by the Russian aggressors. And at the same time, as I'm sure you are all well aware, Moldova has applied for EU membership on March 4th. We would have certainly preferred for this application to have been launched at a time of peace. But history doesn't choose, and our citizens who have long been craving and have long been supporting the strategic choice of Moldova towards European integration would not have allowed us not to lodge this application. And we are incredibly thankful to all our friends and partners in the European Union who understand this craving and who reciprocate us in this time of great peril for the Republic of Moldova. We are also thankful to our EU friends for the Berlin donors meeting. The resources pledged really help Moldova maintain the macro-financial stability on which the political stability rests in Moldova. Because needless to say, in the current geopolitical circumstances, having a strong pro-European, pro-Ukrainian government in Chisinau provides assurances and stability and provides the support that Ukraine needs. And any instability that could arise in Moldova is certainly not in anyone's interest. So the candidacy status that we hope to achieve in the summit in June is not only a morale boost and a legitimation of the cravings of the Moldovan citizens, but also the anchoring of Moldova on the European democratic path. The process of Europeanization and European transformation needs to be made irreversible in the Republic of Moldova. And this is something that our citizens have voted for in the last election last summer, when they voted in a landslide victory for the party that I have the honor of representing, the party built from scratch by Maya Sandu. And we really count that the European Union will consider our application on its merit. And we understand that the process of actual membership, the negotiations for the actual membership, can last a long time. We have no illusions in that regard. But the candidacy status, to make the process irreversible for the Republic of Moldova, is something that would really go a long way to provide some assurances and alleviate some of the anxiety that now permeates the Moldovan society, given the geopolitical circumstances that we find ourselves in. And any hesitation in this regard could be interpreted, and is likely to be interpreted by the aggressor, as a sign of weakness, and actually as a sign of appeasement. I am a member of the also a Moldovan delegation to the Council of Europe, and at my first meeting of the Council of Europe in September 2019, when Russia was welcomed back to the Council of Europe, really sent the wrong message, a message of appeasement, that if you invade a neighboring country, you take a part of its territory by annexing Crimea and effectively the parts of Donetsk and Lugansk, you are grounded by the international community for a couple of years, and then you are forgiven. This is not something that should have happened, and this is actual appeasement. And any hesitation to provide a membership status to Moldova and perhaps Ukraine is likely to be interpreted as appeasing the aggressor. And we are thankful to our European friends and Anya Fotyga and my friend Marek Kuczynski for helping Moldova reduce its dependence on Russia. Poland has been very helpful during the energy crisis that we faced last fall. And we look forward to reducing Moldova's vulnerabilities when it comes to energy dependence. And we are currently engaging forcefully in securitizing Moldovan informational space. And we also count on our support from European friends in combating disinformation and propaganda and in boosting Moldova's cyber defenses. And we are thankful for the assistance that we have received so far. So I can only reassure you that Moldova is fully committed to helping Ukraine the best way we can, and Moldova will do its utmost, despite its own many vulnerabilities, will remain committed to doing its utmost to help our Ukrainian friends and neighbors. And we thank the European Union and European member states who help us maintain the economic and political stability in Moldova so that we can in turn help Ukraine defend itself and defend the European Union and European values. And we really count on the European Union giving us that light at the end of the tunnel at the European Council Summit in June. Thank you, dear friends.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I would like to make my remark as well and to reflect on your introduction, but we are in enormous hurry, I'm sorry. I would like to give the floor to our dear friend, former member of the European Parliament, member of the UK delegation within our ECR political group, now member of the House of Lords, life peer of UK, Lord Daniel Hannan. I know your time is limited, but please address us just with your few sentences.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. It's a real pleasure to see you and to see many old friends and colleagues. Last month, I was with a British delegation, a parliamentary delegation, with Anna Fotyga in Pomerania, building a playground for Ukrainian refugees. It was an orphanage that had moved in its entirety from Ukraine to Poland. And Anna was a wonderful hostess, of course, and we saw the tremendous efforts that people were going to in that region. And this will be familiar to a lot of you in the room. But I want to spell out just how extraordinary has been the response from Poland, and as we've just heard from Slovakia, Moldova, and other frontline states in dealing with this extraordinary refugee crisis. 3 million Ukrainians in Poland, and at every level, people have stepped up. Local government, the healthcare system, the education system, mobile phone companies giving free data, newspapers printing Ukrainian language editions, people opening their houses, making available all the Airbnbs, hotel rooms, and so on. All in a very unfussy and brisk way, without any self-pity, without any self-congratulation. And I think perhaps one of the reasons why Poland stepped up so impressively is because Poles, of all people, know the value of nationhood, understand the value of sovereignty, understand what it means to be fully independent and not in a client relationship with a dominating neighbor. One thing that the Ukrainian conflict has taught us all is the value of independence. All the people who, not of course in the ECR group, but in some of our other groups in the European Parliament, who until February were disdaining nationality as a sort of perversion, who were arguing that the nation state was redundant and dangerous and prone to racism, are suddenly flying the national flag of a friendly country. And Ukraine is teaching us that the freedoms that we value, the basic human rights, free speech, free assembly, the right to cast a vote, equality before the courts, are best protected and flourish most strongly in a nation state. The fact of being a nation state doesn't guarantee those things, but it enables them. It's not a sufficient guarantor of freedom, but it is a necessary component of it. And in defense of the national principle in Ukraine, I want to just finish with one message. Again, I don't think it's particularly to people in this room or colleagues from the ECR and our friends and allies, but I detect a tendency in some European capitals to say, we need to bring this to a dirty end. It may be unjust, it may be dishonorable, but we can't afford any more disruption to the world economy. The French President Emmanuel Macron said in terms, we mustn't humiliate either of the parties. There has to be an honourable way out. I hear the same thing in Germany. I hear the same thing sometimes from friends in the EU institutions. And really, I just want to finish with this point, which is that given what has happened since February, given what Ukraine has suffered, it is not for any other country to put pressure on the authorities in Kiev as to when and on what terms to settle. The decision ultimately has to be for the Ukrainian people. And those of us who believe in freedom and in nationhood should be supportive of their sovereign rights, should give them the tools they need to finish the job, and should allow them to determine what are acceptable conditions for some kind of peace. So let me just finish again by saying thank you to all of you who are doing this. Thank you particularly to Anna Fotyga, who has been tireless in advancing the cause of Ukraine since long before the invasion was launched. Dziękuję Polsko i sława Ukraini.
Dan, thank you very much indeed for this contribution. Now I would like to apologize on behalf of our announced speaker, David Harris, CEO of the American Jewish Committee. Unfortunately, he had problems with his plane from US to Brussels here, and he won't be able to participate in this event, and sending his regards. Luckily, we were able, as usual, to host our dear friend Daniel Schwamenthal, who heads the American Jewish Committee Brussels office and Transatlantic Institute of the American Jewish Committee. Please, floor is yours to address the audience, but please keep in mind that I would like to give the floor to our dear Ukrainian friends as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Anna, honorable members of parliament, your excellencies. First of all, I also want to underline the sincere regrets from David Harris that he couldn't be here. He really tried everything, but the airline had other plans. American Jewish Committee has a long and deep friendship, not just generally with Europe and the European Union, but specifically with the region, Central Europe and Eastern Europe. We were really at the time at the forefront on advocating for the recognition of the Baltic states in the US at a time when such recognition was not yet a foregone conclusion. Our CEO, David Harris, who couldn't be here today, in the 1990s testified in Congress on behalf of NATO expansion. And we have been standing with Ukraine, not just since this invasion, but since the first war, the first invasion started in 2014, and also publicly defended it against the smears at the time already from Moscow that supposedly this is an anti-Semitic country. The same lies that we are hearing today, that Ukraine needs to be denazified. Just 5 years ago, we opened a regional office in Warsaw, and we just came back with a large delegation from a trip that was supposed to be a celebratory trip marking the 5th anniversary, but which became in the end a solidarity visit. We visited all Visegrad 4 countries and the Baltic countries. And of course, Ukraine was the most important issue on our agenda. We, of course, also visited the Ukrainian border and refugee centers, and delivered part of the aid that AJC had collected. I don't have the up-to-date figures, but a month ago we had collected over $2.5 million from AJC supporters. And we also were at a refugee reception center at the Warsaw Central Station. And I want to echo what Dan Hannan just said. what was really touching is not just the incredible help, of course, that the Polish government is offering, but what the Polish people offering, opening not just the purse strings, but also literally their homes. One lady at the central station helping there was just in a process of, on top of what she's already doing, adopting a Ukrainian refugee child. So a few words, and I think that was also the task for David Harris to explain a little bit, what is the US government doing? We are in the process, I think, in the next few days or so, the Congress will approve what then will amount in total to $53 billion in aid. This is really remarkable. It's more than the combined budget for the US State Department and foreign aid. It's a quarter of the Ukrainian pre-war economy and 81% of Russia's defense budget. And what is also remarkable is that Congress actually added another $7 billion onto what the already generous proposal was from the Biden administration. So anyone who is watching US politics right now knows that unfortunately the US is at the moment a very divided country. Everything is very politicized and partisan, but it is remarkable how on this issue the country and both parties have come together. It may be one of the very few issues where Republicans and Democrats see eye to eye. And we will do our utmost to sustain this support. And it is important because of what has been remarked here before. It is not just the incredible heroism and courage that is so inspiring, but Ukrainians are not just defending their own country, they are defending all of our freedom and liberties. This is the new Fulda Gap. Russia must be defeated, and it would be a big setback for all of us if we couldn't achieve this together. And it will also send a strong message to our other opponents, other anti-Western aggressive forces from Beijing to Tehran. So in that sense, Slava Ukraina.
Thank you, Daniel, very much indeed. It's really extremely inspiring, this transatlantic link in support of Ukraine. And there is certainly a miracle and probably unforeseen effects of Putin's policies, surely unforeseen by him, that he was able to unite even over political divisions in countries like US, but also in Poland. Ukraine is certainly this topic where we are united and we are able to speak over political divisions and provide assistance when necessary. Here in the European Parliament, it is visible. The other topic is probably, from Polish point of view, Belarus as well, so similarly important issue. Allow me to reflect on one thing, the very beginning of full-scale invasion of Russia, early morning of February 2022, 24th of February 2022. We remember, of course, the time since December of 2014 and many efforts dedicated here in the European Parliament, in member states, to assist Ukraine, both of the country's path to EU membership, with difficult meandering sometimes, like combating for visa-free regime. Achieving this was also, I think, very helpful also in overcoming many of difficulties, traveling difficulties nowadays. But this February morning, I remember very much many of us waking up with news. Well, they decided to invade Ukraine, and then listening to some of self-proclaimed security experts indicating that how long? Maybe a few days, maybe a few hours, because Russian might so prevailing. I must admit that I got furious and decided to speak to the same, immediately to the same stations and saying that Ukraine and the West, because it is our war, is to win this and will win this war, however difficult it may be. It was 2 hours after aggression, full-scale aggression. I'm really happy that narrative in between changed so much, and major powers, even those most reluctant, step by step are forced predominantly by Ukrainian heroism to change view, change narratives, and start really assisting. It's not sufficient. We know we do everything possible here, and that is why it is so important to host you, Ukrainians MPs in the parliament, and listen to your assessment of situation. This war is online, happening online, and we are aware of all necessary facts happening there, and we try to monitor them on daily, if not hourly basis. But your contribution is valuable. Please, whoever wishes to speak of Ukrainian delegation, please do this now.
Dear Anna, dear colleagues, my name is Vanna Klempur-Sensadzė. We here are representing a cross-party delegation from the Ukrainian parliament, and we are as united as ever, as one could be united, in order to ensure that we are all pitching in to really win this war. So thank you very much for yet focusing on some other issues, the attention here in Brussels, which is important for us. And I believe that there is a lot that we can still do to support Ukraine. And I appreciate, I think, Anna, you are the first politician that I hear from outside, not from Ukraine, saying that we have to defeat Russia using this particular language. Because yes, we believe that the result of this war has to be that Russia is defeated, Russia is isolated, and Russia is incapable to yet again wage any type of dictatorial war against a free nation anywhere in the world, but also that other nations would not use any excuses, any examples that Russia is giving right now, and the response, the possibly, potentially weaker response of the world to Russian Federation, because that would mean the total end of all the geopolitical international law, geopolitical order, and all the international law as we knew it after the end of the Second World War and after the end of Cold War. So yes, I think that that means a lot of dedication, a lot of courage from Ukrainians, but a lot of backing up from transatlantic community, from European community. And I'm very saddened to hear the statistics that Miriam has shared with us, because obviously that means that we've lost a lot of time and that we have still a lot of lessons learned to make and counter internally on European continent, counter internally the well-financed working machine of Russian Federation. I just want to draw your attention that a couple of our committees, our committee that I chair on Ukraine's integration in the EU Foreign Affairs Committee and Humanitarian Policy Committee, have adopted a special kind of call on specific things that could be done in terms of countering propaganda in the EU. So maybe some of those things, we'll just share that with you. Maybe some of those things could be initiated also through the European Parliament, giving it a political push, because we know that this House has always been kind of a leader in showing politically how to support Ukraine and how to ensure that right steps are being taken. Wanted to just reflect on two things here. I think the terminology matters a lot, and we appreciate, all the statements that have been made today here, but also I'm sorry that Mr. Hannan, Lord Hannan is not here, but it's not Ukraine conflict. It is Russian-Ukraine war. And we have to use this language adequately, and I think it's important to understand, in order to also kind of, for other people who do not understand what it is, to finally grasp it. I wanted to also underline that we hope that European politicians would get enough courage to finalize the sixth package of sanctions. We are very much worried that, unfortunately, some of the carve-outs and or some of the loopholes that have been left in those sanctions are being even more so widened as opposed to being closed, by suggesting that it's possible to pay to Russia in rubles. I think it's appalling. I think it's unacceptable. I think, and we heard the position of Polish minister after this meeting of the ministers at the EU level. I think we all have to be very vocal and very clear that this is not the way to go. There is more pressure needed to be put on Russia. All these bloodstreams of financing the terrorist activity of the Russian Federation against Ukrainian people by paying Russia to Russia for gas and for oil and for other goods have to be stopped as soon as possible. And this is our common task, because that is used to kill, torture, destruct, rape our nation and erase us from the map of the world. It's the war for survival for us. And we are not only hoping to survive, but we are hoping to win with a total backing of our partners. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivanka. Thank you for those words. Of course, we share your views. Those of us from the region share your views on payments, on other issues as well. When we speak about face-saving methods to eventually discuss the end of war, I would comment there is nothing to save. Simply, after all those atrocities, we have to think about ensuring that no impunity applies to those perpetrating war crimes. That is another topic. But what is and we react to eventual unfortunate support of some of even institutions in circumventing, that is to be eradicated. But there is positive move as well within Central and Eastern Europe. There is accelerated timing for opening intercollectors also between Poland and Slovakia. That is to probably also to help Slovakia staying more and more independent of Russian hydrocarbons. If other colleagues, Ukrainian colleagues, are willing to speak, please do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Dear colleagues, I'd like to begin by thanking for having us here, for providing this opportunity to see you in person and actually take, yes, this is, not a very happy occasion, but we very glad to see our friends and colleagues here and to work with you. We are here also in the capacity of members of Parliamentary Association Committee, and we were able to conduct a meeting of the Bureau and also take part in meetings of 4 different committees: agriculture, culture, transportation, defense, security, and actually discuss very critical, very important issues. We were very impressed by the level of how well informed our colleagues are. We worked on very concrete issues, answering questions, exchanging ideas on how we proceed to improve this cooperation in different spheres. And we are hoping to be constantly increasing the level of cooperation, the exchange of information, and this practical European integration of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine into the work of the European Parliament. On the issues that were discussed, again, thank you for everything that is being done for Ukrainian displaced persons. We don't like to call them refugees, they temporarily displaced persons. We want to do everything in our capacity and also require assistance to make sure that we create conditions for them to live, but also to encourage them to return when the time comes, when it's safe enough to return to Ukraine. We also drawing attention to those people who had been removed to Russia. Those are not refugees. Those are not displaced people. Those are hostages. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that were forcibly removed from the occupied territories. Among those are tens of thousands of children, and that's a clear sign of genocide.
200,000, almost 200,000.
200,000, thank you. We have cases that are being investigated now where mothers were forcibly separated from their children. Mothers were left in the so-called filtration camps, and children were just sent with strange people. Of course, they are being taken care of, but this all needs to be investigated, and we're grateful the international community is taking very serious measures. Ukraine has been provided technical assistance. There are, as we all know, 40-plus countries who signed up to provide assistance in preparing the evidence for international prosecution of those guilty of these what we see every reason to call genocide crimes. Therefore, these are the directions that Ukraine needs assistance in. We are getting assistance. We, as I said, are very happy to see how deep, how much of understanding we see here in the European Parliament, how strong the language of those resolutions adopted by this institution is, and we definitely hope that that other European institutions will follow the suit and will also be as strong and unwavering on supporting Ukraine in this fight that it's not just Russian-Ukraine war, but good against evil, democracy against autocracy. So thank you again. We're very happy to be here and see you all.
It was very explaining contribution. I wondered myself listening to Ambassador Deszczyca about language used to indicate or describe group that we clearly call refugees. And from our point of view, it is extremely important because generally speaking, there is a long-standing and complicated debate within the EU about economic migration, voluntary or triggered by external forces, and fleeing from atrocities of the war or conflict. That is why we so clearly state about refugee status for all those. The social characteristics is, when I look on Polish case, totally different, because we see from the first hours, days, that majority of those fleeings have been women and kids, eventually elderly people, elderly men, and the direction of crossing for young men was the other way round. We know many cases of Polish businesses. There were many Ukrainians employed there. Some of them still are, but many simply decided to leave their peaceful work and return to Ukraine in order to defend, to combat, actively combat, and therefore we differentiate here. But I understand your meaning. That is why probably we stress so much in Polish case that we are not willing to formalize compounds for refugees, or to agree to forceful compulsory quotas within the EU. Those coming to Poland are free people, free Ukrainians, and they are free to return whenever they wish, whenever conditions allow. We understand they want to be as close to their country, to their homes as possible. And reflecting on your remarks about forceful movement of people to Russian territory, that is obviously ethnic cleansing, long-known methods. We stressed those methods and indicated similar policies of Catherine the Second and Stalin, and now of Putin regime earlier against Crimean Tatars and others, in removing them and dispersing them in a variety of places of Russia, and same vicious methods used nowadays against hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. I think it requires separate seminar with experts as well, and exposing in depth this issue alone, because so many atrocities and so long-standing and possibly unbelievable suffering of people for sometimes for generations. We hope to cut it as soon as possible. Thank you. Others, colleagues, I know that Witold Waszczykowski, you, oh, he was not able to connect. So are other colleagues willing to speak? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Dear friends, I think that we will, all of us would like to share very shortly on our very important topic, because for us there is no dates now. For us it's 84th of the war, and also we think that it's not only Russian Ukrainian war, but it's also a war against NATO countries, and it's a war against democracy. And that is why if Ukraine falls, this will be defeat of democracy. And I'm sure that already all the countries have to start to realize that the strategy is only to defeat, not to find the ways how to deal with Russia again. And sorry to be very direct, but I think that the comfort life after Second World War and Cold War, I mean, it is over. It is over, and it's over not only after 24th of February. We were asking and we were discussing a lot of issues starting from 2014. And that is why when we are talking about security guarantees, I think that not to have war against NATO country, that is why we are asking to help now Ukraine as much as you can and to use all your capacities, because we are not asking, we don't need boots on the ground. We are now asking weapon, and really sanctions, which will minimize all that atrocities which my colleague have been already mentioned, because it's not only forced deportation, it's not only kidnapping, it's not only tortured, but again, that they would like just to erase really our nation. And yesterday we took part in Culture Committee here in European Parliament, and we have heard some colleagues like how to find the dialogue again with Russia, Russian culture, and so on. Russian culture, you can see what they have done in Bucha, and Russian culture, you can see what they are doing now in Mariupol. And that's what they would like to do with the whole Ukraine. Because also, that we have thousands of hostages. We have our children were stolen, and we really, it will be a very long road when we could save them and to return. And to this regard, I would like to ask to pay attention that European Commission on the 12th of May, they provided a recommendation to EU countries to provide a memorandum with Ukraine on protection of displaced people and also prevention of adoption, because unfortunately we know some cases when EU citizens would like to adopt. We would like to return our people back. We need this generation for our future. And my second point is, of course, candidacy. We don't want EU countries to look for other variant of candidacy or all other excuses, if I can say. We have to have this candidacy because Putin is again against this candidacy, and Ukrainian people deserve this candidate status. That is why we think it's not half measures already decisions. It has to be, yes, brave and very strong decisions, because we have been also, it's not only about EU candidacy, but also NATO. I mean, we were neutral in 2014, and it doesn't help us. And that is why we think that the best security guarantee will be membership in NATO. And that is why we also are sure that our armed forces are doing miracles on the battlefield, and our Ukrainian armed forces, it will be an asset for NATO. So to finalize, I think that really EU and free world has adopted a strategy, not only to defend democratic principles, but also to fight for them. And that is why we are very looking forward for actions, for very brave actions, and not, to find again some comfort zone, how to deal with Russia as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, of course, there is always danger and stream of political thinking, how to renew dialogue with Russia and return to business as usual. But I think that, well, when I compare it to not so distant time, it is just marginal and hopefully not very influential. So I think that with some difficulty, we maintain unity. We stress necessity to keep unity vis-à-vis Putin. Of course, we strongly criticize any mentioning of or any will to save his face. It's impossible already after all those things. And we are, I think that the general perception changed already, and the West sees Ukraine fully on this side and is not willing to leave Ukraine to Russian mercy. So it is certainly to push Russian troops out of Ukrainian territory. In my view, clearly stating, including Crimea. So full international recognize Ukrainian territory. I think there is a change in thinking and visible in actions already. I know it is not sufficient, but we are not one nation. We have to keep. We cherish sovereignty and the will of people, of individual ally and individual EU member state, but in these difficult circumstances, I think that we are able to keep this unity, and together will assist Ukraine in defeating Russia and do it together. I'm afraid our time is already over. So thank you very much indeed. I would like to thank all participating persons for this very interesting and very instructive event. It was to present just particular layer of all problems accompanying the appalling Russian invasion of sovereign, full-scale invasion of sovereign country, our neighbor. We wanted to present three cases of regional effort: Polish, Slovakian, and Moldovan. Of course, as mentioned by other colleagues as well, we should also praise the efforts undertaken by Czechia, by Hungary, by Romania, by other countries. but these one we wanted to present in depth, also to show possibilities. The ambassador of Ukraine indicated positive effects. All those present in our region, or many of them, want to of course I think that vast majority want to return to their homeland, but they want to return with additional knowledge and contributing to quick rebuilding of country. Now they are aware, and we are aware, that supporting the Ukrainian war effort is necessary, including economic, financial, in-kind support, not only in terms of military efforts, but also, for example, in supporting agriculture. There are many endeavors to do this. We know vicious Russian policy in this area in Ukraine, also big separate topic. But they want to learn, refugees want to learn also European methods of maintaining business, on creating business, on making it international, or acting over state borders. And I think it is to contribute to our future cooperation, and that is positive. Also, sign of their presence. They show already entrepreneurial skills, and there is very important, and giving hope for both EU, our individual member states, and Ukraine and future of Ukraine. Thank you very much indeed for this.